Morning, everyone. We are in Masechta Middos, Perek Dalid. We're going to begin learning today Mishnah Zayin. We have to remember something that the Mishnah said in Mishnah Vov last week. The Mishnah said that the Heichal was 100 amos high, 100 amos wide, and 100 amos long. And last week's Mishnah, Perek Daled Mishnah Vav, explained the height of the Heichal as being 100 amos. We had a diagram, one moment. We had a diagram that showed the height of the Heichal as being 100 amos. I don't have a diagram at the moment. Anyway, diagram number 39, it showed us that from the floor to the top gate to the color orave, the thing that kept the birds away, there was 100 amos. That's what we did in Perek Daled Mishnah Vov. The height of the Heichal was 100 amos. And now we're going to be taking a look today at the width and the length of the Heichal. We're going to take a step back to do a necessary chazorah, a review. We're coming to the very end of Masechta Middos, and it's time to do a little bit of a chazorah of where we are and how we got here. Diagram number 1. In fact, before we go to diagram number 1, let's go to diagram number 2, which we haven't looked at in a while. Diagram number 2. The outside of this black wall is the city of Yerushalayim. This wall is the wall of the Har Habayis. And we're looking at the Har Habayis from east to west. So you came to this door, and we call this Shushan Habira. So there were 5 ways to enter Har Habayis. One entry point was on the eastern wall, which we call Shushan Habira. So if you were standing on Har HaZeisim, you would walk down Har HaZeisim and come to this entry point. To the southern side, there were 2 entrances to the Har Habayis, and we call those Shari Chulda. To the west, there was 1 entry point, and that's called Kipunus. And on the north, there was 1 entry point called Tedi, which really wasn't used. We learned about it. It was used for Kohanim, who became Tomei and had to leave the Har Habayis. But those are the 5 entry points on the Har Habayis. Now you've entered the Har Habayis. So let's go for a moment to diagram 1. You've entered the Har Habayis from the eastern gate, and the eastern gate had a bridge from Har HaZeisim, Har HaMishcha, to the eastern gate, Shushan Habira. And you walked through this gate. You walked through this gate, you came into the Har Habayis. Let's go back to diagram number 2. Walked into the Har Habayis. There was a little gate called the Soreg, beyond which a Gentile couldn't go. Between the Soreg and the wall of the Ezras Nashim, the dark black wall, was something called the Chayil. And the Chayil was 10 amos wide. The Chayil had 12 steps in it. Each step is a half amma high. Therefore, the Ezras Nashim is 6 amos higher than the Har Habayis. So if you're in the Ezras Nashim, you're 6 amos higher than the Har Habayis. You continue to the 15 steps at the western end of the Ezras Nashim, and those 15 steps are half amma each. So now when you enter Shar Nikanor, you're now an additional 7.5 amos higher than you were. So if you walked into Shar Nicanor, you're 13.5 amos higher than the Har Habayis. 6 elevated from the Ezras Noshim, 7.5 from the Shar Nicanor. You continued walking. There was 2.5 amos again of a step up, made up of a step an amma and 3 steps half an amma, which was the duchan for the Levim when they sang the Shir Shel Yom of the carbon. So now you're at 16 amos. You elevated yourself 6 by the 12 steps into the Ezras Noshim, 7.5 by going up the 15 steps in Nicanor. That's 13.5, and 2.5 if you were permitted to go there, if you were Kohen, Levi, another 2.5 amos you elevated yourself before you got to the Mizbeach. So if you're standing at the Mizbeach, you're 16 amos higher than the area around it, Har Habayis. You then continued westward. You came to the Ulam, this rectangular building, and that's what we call a Ravid picture. The Rambam does not agree with this picture. We're not going to go deeply into the Rambam. This is the Ravid picture. The Ulam is a rectangular structure in front of the Heichal, and the Heichal has walls around it, and the walls have ta'im. The walls are corridors. We said the Rambam holds that, Rashi holds that they are compartments. We're learning now, like the Rambam, that they were actually corridors. And now we're going to be moving further west today, and we're going to learn about the measurements. So we know about what was built. Now we're going to we started with the measurements. We started measuring the Azorah. We started measuring the Heichal. Let's take a look at 3 separate structures, and this is why I wanted to review this today for the definitions. This is Ezras Noshim. We're not talking about that. We spent time on that. Ezras Noshim and the 4 rooms and the corners. Ezras Noshim is 135 by 135. We've been looking at this area, the second square or rectangle here, and this is Azorah. This is not Azorah. This is Ezras Noshim. We're done with that. We're focusing on this. And in the Azorah, there is a structure called Ulam Heichal. And around the Ulam and Heichal, there's open space called Azorah. The same way when we look at the Har Habayis, the Har Habayis has empty space. And on the Har Habayis, there's a Beis HaMikdash. The Beis HaMikdash does not take up the whole Har Habayis. We learned earlier in the Masechta how much room there was on each side, open space on each side. The southern side of the Har Habayis had the most open space between the wall of the Har Habayis in the south and the wall of the Soreg. This is the largest open space on the Har Habayis. So there's a Har Habayis, open space, Beis HaMikdash. Again, no, we're not talking about Ezras Noshim. So in this Azorah, there is also open space. And in the Azorah, there is built the Heichal and the Ulam and the Heichal. So we have Yushalayim, Har Habayis, Beis HaMikdash. In Beis HaMikdash, Ezras Noshim, Azorah. In Azorah, Ulam and Heichal. Now this Ulam and Heichal, if you're standing in here, you're 6 amos higher than outside the Heichal. If you're standing at the Mizbeach, you are 16 amos higher than if you were on the Har Habayis. But when you went into the Ulam, there were 12 steps. That means when you were in the Ulam and in the Heichal, you were another 6 amos higher. So that this structure, Ulam and Heichal, is now built 6 amos higher than the open area around it. This Azorah area is 16 amos higher than the Har Habayis. this Heichal Ulam area is 22 amos higher than the Har Habayis, or the Heichal Ulam is 6 amos higher than the Azara around it. So this is the area we're going to be measuring today. We've already measured the height of the Ulam and the Heichal as being 100, and now we're going to look at the width and the length. Width meaning we're looking at it from north to south, and length meaning we're looking at it from east to west. Okay, and again, this is going to be, it's 100 by 100 by 100. When I say that, we're talking about this, Heichal and Ulam. Okay, please don't get confused. Heichal and Ulam, 100 long, 100 wide, 100 high. We are not talking about the bigger Azara. The bigger Azara, the Mishnah is going to tell us, is from east to west, 187, north to south, 135. So the Azara is 187 by 135, and in that 187 by 135, the Heichal Ulam take up 100 by 100. So the same way the Beis Hamikdash did not take up the whole Har Habayis, the Ulam and the Heichal did not take up the whole Azara. The Heichal and the Ulam are structures in the Azara. Azara is 187 east to west, 135 north to south, and in that 187 by 135, there is a structure, Ulam Heichal, that's 100 by 100, and those are the measurements we're going to be taking a look at today. If we take a look at our diagram, which we have looked at for a long time, diagram 4, there's your wall of the Har Habayis. There's your empty space on the south side. You're entering here into the Ezras Nashim. Steps, Nicanor, and now you're in the Azara. In the Azara, there's this structure that we now know to be the front part rectangular is Ulam, behind that is Heichal. And that's your Har Habayis, Beis Hamikdash. If we go to our diagram number 3, we're seeing it from an aerial view. Enter Ezras Nashim, 15 steps, Shar Nicanor, Ezras Yisrael, Ezras Kohanim, Mizbeach, the space between the Ulam and the Mizbeach, the 12 steps, the Ulam, the Heichal. Again, you can clearly see this is Ezras Nashim. We're done with that. This is Azara. From here to here, Azara is 187 by 135, and in the Azara, there's a Heichal and Ulam that's 100 by 100. And now we're going to study this 100 by 100. We've already seen last week the measurements of 100 high. Now we're going to do width and length. Okay, so we're in Perek Daled Mishnah Zayin, page 65 of your Middos. And now we're talking about, the Mishnah says, Me Mizrach L'Mayrav Meya Amma, from east to west, which is the length. And we're going to be looking at diagram 40A. We're going to be looking at this diagram, 40A, and we're just using numbers. The Mishnah is going to tell us numbers, and the picture is going to show you the numbers. So if you watch the Mishnah and the picture, you're going to see the numbers. Mizrach L'Mayrav, east to west, from the Ulam, the east, until the back wall of the Heichal in the west. Remember, we're talking about Ulam and Heichal. The Azara itself is bigger. So here, for example, you see behind this wall, which is the Heichal wall, there's open space. This is Azara. Any place that's inside the Azara but outside the Heichal is Azara. Okay. So the Mishnah says, Mehamizrach l'mayrav me'ama, from east to west, not to the back wall of the Azorah, but to the back wall of the Heichal. Kosel ha'ulam, the thickness of the wall of the ulam, and you can just track this with your picture and the Mishnah. 5 amos is the thickness of the ulam wall. V'ha'ulam achas esrei, the width of the ulam until you get to the wall of the Heichal is 11. Kosel ha'Heichal sheish, the thickness of the Heichal wall is 6. V'tocho abayim amo, the Heichal, the length of the Heichal is 40 amos. Amatraxin. Then you had something right here. You can see it's 1 amma. It's called the amatraxin. Amatraxin is a double curtain. It separates the Heichal from the Kodesh Kadoshim. The Heichal is 40 amos in length. And in the Heichal, on the southern wall, you have the menorah. On the northern wall, you have the shulchan and the lechem aponim. And in the center, you have the mizbeach upon which they brought the Kethoristic incense. That's in this Heichal. The Heichal is 40 amos from east to west. And then you have a double curtain. We'll talk about the double curtain in a moment. It's what we would consider the paroches. We have the double curtain. Behind the double curtain is the Oron, and that's the Kodesh Kadoshim. The reason why they had a double curtain here, and in between the 2 curtains they left an amma, is because at the time of the second Beis Hamikdash, they had a suffix. They had a question that they couldn't resolve. There has to be a partition between the Kodesh, the Heichal, and the Kodesh Kadoshim where the Oron is, where the Kohen Gadol only was allowed to go once a year. So we know there was in the Mishkan, there was a curtain partition. So you had to have a partition. The question that they couldn't resolve during the second Beis Hamikdash was whether the curtain, the place where the curtain should be, is part of Heichal. The curtain is going to take up a certain amount of room, no matter how thin that curtain is. I'm explaining the amatraxin in the most simple fashion I can, because there are a lot of different mafarshim about the suffix, the doubt and question that arose in the second Beis Hamikdash about this amatraxin. We'll get to the word traxin in a minute. There was a doubt as to whether that curtain should be part of Heichal. It's going to take up this curtain, the thickness of the curtain is going to take up a certain amount of space. Should it take up space in the Heichal, which means the Heichal wouldn't be a complete 40, it would be 40 less the thickness of the curtain, but that would leave the Kodesh Kadoshim to be a complete 20 amos from east to west. Or should the thickness of the curtain be in Kodesh Kadoshim area, which means the Kodesh Kadoshim will be slightly less than 20, but the Heichal would be completely 40. So they had a suffix. So what they did is they built a curtain at the end of the Heichal area, a curtain at the beginning of Kodesh Kadoshim area, and left an amma in between. So that by doing this, the Heichal was a full 40, the Kodesh Kadoshim was a full 20, and they left a space in between the two of an amma where the doubt arose as to where that amma, what that amma should be, and they sectioned it off with 2 curtains, and in between that there was an amma. So that's called the amatraxin. We're going to come back to the name traxin in a moment. Just let's finish the numbers. We said that the kosel of the ulam is 5, the ulam is 11 wide. Then you have the kosel of the heichal itself is 6, the heichal itself is 40, the double curtain is 1, the Kodesh Kadoshim, the Mishnah says on page 65, Esrim Amma base Kodesh HaKadoshim, the Kodesh HaKadoshim is 20, Kosel HaHeichal, now you have the back wall of the heichal, Shesh, Vahateh Shesh, we learned about the corridors that went around 3 sides, that's also 6, the Kosel Hateh Chomesh, and the wall of the Teh is 5. So if you add all that up, you're going to have 100 from the beginning of the wall of the Ulam until the back wall of the Heichal. You have 100. So we now know that the Ulam Heichal were 100 tall, and they were 100 long from east to west. This structure, Ulam Heichal, inside the Azara, takes up 100 amos east to west. The word Troxin is an interesting word. According to one shot, Troxin, the word Trak means terak, means to sort of cover up or protect, to lock off. Truku gali, to lock it off and to protect. And what do you want to protect? The sin. What's inside the Kodesh Kodashim? The luchos that we got at Har Sinai. So this curtain, this Amma Taraxin, it's a Taraxin. It covers and protects the luchos that we got at Sinai, Traxin. It is the protection and cover for the luchos we got at Sinai. I don't know what all this means in terms of what I'm about to say. It dawned on me last night that Traxin, if you take a look at how Traxin is spelled, the last 3 letters is Samach, Yud, Nun, Sofit, Sin. And that's how we designate sort of a contraction of Sinai. It should be really Trak Sinai, the protection of the luchos that we got at Sinai, but they, the Chazal called it Trak Sin. They dropped the Yud of Sinai and they have it as Sin. And Sin, China is very much in our news today. I doubt that one has anything to do with the other, but Chazal, when they wanted to refer to Har Sinai, sometimes referred to Har Sinai as Sin. And that's why this is called Trak Sin, the cover or protection for the luchos that we got at Sin. So we've done east to west. Now we're going to move on. The Mishnah on page 66 says, Min Hatzafon Ladoro. And now we're going to go to diagram 43. What we want to do is look at the Heichal and the Ulam from north to south. We're doing the width now. And that's diagram 43. This is the Heichal. Now the Mishnah is going to start explaining just the Heichal without the Ulam. So the Ulam is in diagram 44. That's your rectangular structure in front of the Heichal. Let's forget for a moment about the rectangle and just let's focus on Heichal. The Mishnah says, Min Hatzofon L'Dorom, from north to south, Shivim Amma. The Heichal is 70 Amos, from the northern wall to the southern wall, the outer northern wall, the outside of the northern wall, which includes the thickness of the northern wall, to the outside of the southern wall, which includes the thickness of the southern wall, is 70 amos. Where are we going to get the 100? We'll soon see that. But right now, we're only looking at the 70, and that's diagram 43. The Heichal is 70. We're looking, remember, we said this is a Rambam picture. There are 5 corridors, which means that they built walls, and the walls were sort of thin, and between each wall, there was open space to walk in. And these are the 5 corridors. 5 below the level of the floor, which right here are the 12 steps to the Ulam. Each step is a half amma high, so this is 6 amas off the ground. And right here you have the basement, 5 corridors, 6 amas high. First floor, 5 corridors, 6 amas high. Second floor corridor, 6 amas high. 15, we said there are 8 in the back, and that's the Mishnah we learned about, the 38 corridors ta'im. So now the Mishnah says, let's go from page 66. The Mishnah says at the top line, in Atzafon Ladar, north to south, Shivam Amma. Kosel HaMasiba. Remember, we learned that each corridor had a name. The wall of the Masiba, Chomesh, 5 Amas. HaMasiba, That's the corridor that had the ramp in it. You walked up to the ramp and you were able to get to the roof of these ta'im, and if you had to, you can get to the roof of the heichal. Kosel hateh chamesh, the next corridor is called the wall of the teh, it's 5. Vahateh sheish, the next corridor is called the teh, and it's 6 amos wide. Kosel ha'heichal sheish, the wall of the heichal is sheish. V'tocho esrim amma, inside the heichal, in its width, it is 20. So how big was the heichal, Rabbi Say? We just learned that the heichal from east to west was 40. We just learned that from north to south it's 20. And we learned that its height is 100. So the heichal is 40 length, east to west, 20 width, north to south, and 100 high. That's your heichal. And now the Mishnah goes to the southern side. You're going to have the same thing because the corridors go all around. So we can just read it quickly. You have the numbers at the bottom of diagram 43. Whatever happened on the north happens on the south, basically. We have the same numbers. Kosel ha'heichal sheish, v'hateh sheish, v'kosel hateh chomesh, Veis Horodas Hamayim Sholosh Amos. That we haven't talked about yet. That is the corridor on the southern wall. Second from the southern wall, it says Veis Horodas Hamayim. And this basically was a place where we learned about the roof of the heichal. Now, obviously, there's rain. And they had a pipe system. The roof of the heichal, the 100 amos at height, was slightly slanted to the south, and there was a pipe that came down the southern wall of the heichal to drain off the rainwater, and the rainwater would then, through the pipe, come into this corridor, and then there's a machlokes what they did with this water, whether they made it into a mikveh, whatever it was. Beis Horodas Hamayim means this is the place where the water came down to. Okay, and that corridor is 3 amos wide, and in there was this channel of water. V'hakosel chamesh amos, and the southern wall here, the corridor, chamesh amos. So you just follow the Mishnah and the picture, each number, and this area called heichal is 70. We said that the ulam heichal is 100 by 100 by 100. We now know that the ulam and heichal are 100 high, that the ulam and heichal are 100 long, but the heichal was only 70 wide. So when the Mishnah said the ulam heichal are 100 wide, it means the heichal plus the ulam. And that's why you go down to diagram 44. This heichal, without the rectangle, is 70 wide. The rectangle is 100 wide, which means the rectangle is 30 amos wider than the heichal. How do you split 30? 15 and 15. So the ulam to the north was 15 amos wider. The ulam to the south was 15 amos. So when the Mishnah says it was 100 by 100 by 100, it's including the wings that came out at the ulam. So even though it didn't continue. Right here we're dealing with 70. Right here we're dealing with 100. The Mishnah says 100 by 100 and 100 tall. So now the Mishnah explains the 100 in the width, because we only explained so far 70. Here's the 70. That's all we have is 70. This structure, flip it, put it here, it's 70. Now we're going to add 30 more. The Mishnah says on page 66, Ha'ulam odif alav chamesh esrei amma min atzafon v'chamesh esrei amma min adorom. The ulam was 15 amos wider than the heichal on the southern side and the northern side, making this 100. V'hu hayanikra, and these two wings here, which came out of the width of the Heichel 70, and here you have 15 additional amos, and here you have additional amos, and you can see in your diagram it says Beit HaChalifot. These were rooms, the wing area that jutted out of the south and jutted out of the north is called the Beit HaChalifot. It's the room where you store the knives. Chalifot are knives. That's where they stored knives. So there's a machlokes in the Rishonim whether they stored knives that they used to use to shecht animals, and the knives became posel. You couldn't use them anymore. So they didn't throw them away. They stored them in these rooms. And other Rishonim say that these rooms were not for knives that became posel. They were rooms where they stored good knives. Remember, we mentioned that Kohanim had 24 mishmoros. They worked a week, and then they came back 24, 25 weeks later, and again they had a mishmor. Each mishmar had their own set of knives, and each mishmar had a compartment in these Beit HaChalifot, and their knives were stored. Those were their personal shechting knives that were stored there. And that's what the Mishnah says, that these two 15 Amo wings of the Ulam, Hayanikra Beit HaChalifot, was called the house of the knives. Shasham gonzim es hasakinim, that's where you would hide the knives. And now the Mishnah is going to tell us what the significance is of this kind of picture. This is obviously Hakol B'chsav Miyad Hashem Elai Hiskil. The way the Beis Hamikdash is built is based upon direct nevuah from HaKadosh that we receive from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Nosen Hanovi God HaChozeh. And they taught this to David, who gave it to Shlomo. Why was the Heichal Ulam built this way? A large rectangle in front of the Heichal. And now the Mishnah says, V'ha-Heichal tzor me'achora, the Heichal was narrow in the back, V'rochov milofonov, and it was wide in the front. The Ulam widened the Heichal, narrow in the back Heichal, wide in the front Ulam, and this whole thing was one structure. What was it supposed to symbolize? Vidomala Ari. It looks like a lion. Why? Shanema, the pasuk says in Yeshaya, Perek Chavtes pasuk Aleph, Hoi Ariel, Ariel, Kiryat Chana David. Woe to the Ariel, to the Ariel. The Ariel, the lion of God, and that pasuk is talking about the Heichal Ulam area. So it describes the Heichal Ulam area as the lion of God. And now the Mishnah continues on page 67. You've seen a lion. Lion's head is huge in the front, and his body narrows behind his head. Very large head, and the body behind it is narrow. So the Mishnah says, just like a lion, narrow from the back and wide in the front. So too the Heichal. It's narrow in the back, it's 70 amas. And the Ulam was 100 in front to give us this picture of wide in the front, narrow in the back, so that we can symbolize for ourselves the lion, the Ariel. Okay, and that brings us to the conclusion of Perek Dalet. We're going to start today Perek Hey to remain on schedule for our Siyum Bli Neder this week. Perek Hey again continues measurements, but now instead of measuring the Heichal, let's go back to diagram 3. We've been measuring the Heichal Ulam. This Heichal Ulam looked like a lion, wide in front, narrow in the back. How big was this structure? 100 high, 100 long, and 100 wide. Where was it 100 wide? Only in the front. The ulam is 100 wide. Right behind the ulam, the heichal, is 70 wide. So far, we've measured this structure, heichal ulam. We have not measured yet the greater area, which is Azara. Heichal ulam in Azara. This 100 by 100 by 100 is in a bigger area. Well, how big is this whole area? Azara. Not Ezras Nashim, we did that, 135 by 135. How big is the Azara? 187 east to west, 135 north to south. And that's what the mission is now going to describe. And that's a diagram, Perek Hamishi, Mishnah Aleph, page 67, diagram 45. Diagram 45. Again, you read the Mishnah, follow the numbers. You can see in diagram 45, we're not dealing with Ezras Nashim, we're dealing with the Azara. Where does the Azara begin? Rabbi Isai, where does the Azara begin? Diagram 4. Ezras Nashim, we're not dealing with. 15 steps, Shar Nicanor. Shar Nicanor, once you walk through that Shar Nicanor, you're now in Azara. So we are measuring Azara, which begins at the back wall of the Azara and goes to Shar Nicanor, or looking at east to west, goes from Shar Nicanor. You can see here in the picture, the Heichal ends. This is Heichal. And between Heichal and wall of Azara, there's space here. And the Mishnah is going to tell us how much space here. This is Azara, this is Azara, this is Azara. The Mizbeach is in the Azara. The Kiyar is in the Azara. This is Heichal and Ulam. They're built in the Azara, but they are a separate structure and have separate Kedusha. Behind the Heichal, there's Azara place. Between black wall here and black wall here, there's space, which is Azara, the whole Azara. So the Mishnah now tells us, looking at 45, Kol HaAzara, the entire Azara, Hoisa Orech Mea Ushmona B'Sheva, it's 187 going from east to west, Al Rochav Mea Ushloshim B'Chomesh, and the width of the Azara is 135. So now we're going to start with the length. Min HaMizrach L'Mayra, from east to west, Mea Ushmona B'Sheva, 187. How you do 187? The Mishnah tells you. Remember, we looked at diagram 3. As soon as you walked into Shar Nicanor, there was something called Ezras Yisrael. A Yisrael can stand here because he just wants to stand there. You're allowed to stand there. A Yisrael cannot go beyond that point. The next area is called Ezras Kohanim. A Kohen is allowed to go there. A Yisrael is not allowed to go there unless the Yisrael is bringing a carbon and has to do something with the carbon. For example, smicha, putting his hands on the head of the carbon. Other than that, a Yisrael cannot go beyond Ezras Yisrael. The Kohanim can be here. The Kohanim can even go further. So now we're measuring all those places. Diagram 45. We have to measure 187 from east to west. So the Mishnah says, as soon as you walked into Shar Nicanor, you came to Mokim Teresas Yisrael, the place where Jewish people can walk. Yisrael, I mean Jewish people, I mean a Yisrael. Achas Esrei Amma was 11 Amos wide. Mokim Teresas HaKohanim, Achas Esrei Amma, the place for the Kohanim is 11. HaMizbeach Shloshim Ushtayim, the Mizbeach, we spent a lot of time learning how to build the Mizbeach, was 32. Bein HaUlam V'lam Mizbeach, the place between the Ulam and the Mizbeach, which included the 12 steps up into the Ulam, Esem Ushtayim Amma, that space was 22. Now HaHeichel, how big was the Heichel? We just learned it 5 minutes ago. This Heichel, meaning Ulam, Diagram 40. Ulam and Heichal was 100. We learned about 100 by 100 by 100, but east to west, the Ulam is 100. And the Mishnah doesn't break down now the 100 because it did it in the last parak. We already know that the Ulam, Heichal, inside the Azara is 100 east to west. So the Mishnah says that from Ulam, going back to diagram 45, Ulam plus Heichal, 100 amos. V'achas esrei ama lachore beis hakaporos. And after the Heichal wall ended, there was still space between the Heichal wall and the Azara wall. Again, the Heichal Ulam is a structure in Azara, but did not take up the whole Azara. So there's space outside the dark wall that is Azara that's not Heichal. And the same way to the north and the south and the east. There's places called Azara that's not Ulam Heichal. By the same token, behind the Azara, there's an open space between between Heichal and the wall of the Azara. This space, the Mishnah says, Achas Esrei Ama Lachori Beis HaKaporos. Is 11 Amma behind the Heichal. They call it the Beis HaKaporos because this is where the Kodesh Kadoshim is. On top of the Aron is the Kapores, the covering of the Aron. So they call it the room of the Kapores. And the room of the Kapores has the Heichal wall. Between the Heichal wall and the Azara wall are 11 amos. You add all that up from east to west. From the point that you walk in, you walk up the 15 steps, you go into Nicanor, you now have 187 amos from that entry point until the back wall of the Azara, not the back wall of the Heichal. From here, Nicanor, until back wall of Azara, 187. Okay, let's go to the next Mishnah so that we're not in the middle of a subject. That's all we're doing now is diagram 46. We've done now, the Mishnah said that the Azara is 187. We just did the 187, and it's by 135 in width, north to south. What made up that width? Now the Mishnah is going to tell you diagram 46. From north to south, the Azara was Mea Ushloshim V'Chomish, was 135 amos. Now the Mishnah doesn't start from here. We don't know how big this area is, from the wall of the Heichal until the ramp to the Kevesh, the ramp to the Mizbeach. The Mishnah doesn't tell us yet how much space is here. Instead, the Mishnah starts with the ramp. HaKevesh v'hamizbeach shishim u'shtayim. The ramp and the Mizbeach together took up 62 of the 135. Now there's a question here, which it's a complicated question. This should really be 64, not 62, because we learned that the Mizbeach was 32, and we also learned that the ramp was 32. 32 and 32 is 64. So how can the Mishnah say that the ramp and the Mizbeach was 62? The Gemara in Zvachim asks that question, and the Gemara gives an answer about a very technical point, how the ramp and the Mizbeach were built. It was built in such a way that while the ramp was 62, it also had little holes, not even holes, little niches in it. When you push the ramp into the Mizbeach, and you couldn't push it fully, that's itself a discussion. When you push the ramp into the Mizbeach, so in other words, it wasn't 32 ramp and 32 Mizbeach for 64. The ramp had niches at certain points in it, and you were able to move it closer into the Mizbeach. So it's not 32 and 32, it became 32 and 30. So the area of the Mizbeach and the ramp are 62 of the 135 in width. Min Mizbeach la Tabaot. Remember we learned about the Tabaot were going towards the northern wall. Those were the half circles on the floor where they were able to put the neck of an animal, a large animal that had to be shechted to hold it straight. And this area with the 24 rings, the Mishnah says, Min ha-mizbeach lataba'ot shmona amos. From the point where the Mizbeach ended until the ring started was 8 amos. Makam hataba'ot esrim va'arba. The place of the 24 rings took up 24 amos. Min hataba'ot l'shulchanot arba. From the rings, the last set of rings, the northernmost set of rings, until you got to those tables. We learned about the tables, they were made out of stone, and at the top they put wood, and that's the tables that they would take the animal after shechita, and they would open up the animal and take out the insides and wash it down. They needed tables for that, and there were 8 tables. So, min hataba'ot la shulchanot arba, min ha-shulchanot v'la nanasim arba. Nanasim were very short poles, and on the poles, remember we learned there were hooks, and after the animals were cleaned out on the tables, they then took the animal to the shulchanot, and there were hooks, they hooked the animal on, they were able to take the skins off, etc., in preparation to bring it on the mizbeach. So that's another 8 amos. If you look at your picture, they're showing you 4 and 4 is 8, and the tables were in the middle. So you have 8 tables, and you have a space of 8. Okay, that you're showing that 4 plus 4. The tables were sort of in the middle. Min hananasim lekosel ha'azora. From these small little poles that had the hooks until the wall of the Azora, Shmona Amos, there were 8 Amos. Now, if you added everything up that we had till now, instead of having 135, you only had 110. So we're missing 25 Amos. So the Mishnah says, Vahamosar, and the remaining area, which is 25, was split evenly. Now we go back to the southern wall. Bein hakevesh lakosel, between the ramp and the wall, the southern wall of the Heichal, was 12 and a half. Umakom hananasim, and the place where the poles with the hooks until the wall, the northern wall of the Heichal, was again 12 and a half. So the Mishnah actually measured 110, and then there's 12 and a half between the ramp and the southern wall of the Heichal. And then there's another 12 and a half between those poles with the hooks and the northern wall of the Heichal. 110 plus 12 and a half plus 12 and a half is 135. So we now know the Heichal, okay, the Heichal and the Ulam are 100, 100 by 100. But then you take the Heichal and the Ulam, and you put it into the Azara. This area is 100 by 100 by 100, but it's in a bigger place that's 187 by 135. So go to diagram 45. Ezras Nashim, which we finished talking about a long time ago, 135 by 135, done. Azara, 187 long, east to west, by 135, north to south. In the Azara, there's the Heichal Ulam, and that is 100 by 100 by 100. And that's where we're up to now. Blineda, tomorrow we'll continue with Mishnah Gimel. And that's basically our measurements of our Beis HaMikdash. If we go back to diagram 4, the Har Habayis originally, the whole Temple Mount, originally, before any Hordus business, the Temple Mount is 500 amos by 500 amos. 500 by 500 is inside this green gate. Inside this green gate, there's open area to the south, open area to the east, open area to the north, some open area in the west. And in this 500 by 500, there's an Ezras Noshim that's 135 by 135, and a Heichal Ulam that's 187 by 135, and then you can do your math yourself. 187 length Heichal, 187 length east to west. Azora, 187, plus 135 length east to west Ezras Noshim, 187 plus 135 will tell you now how much open space you still have on the east and the west. Of course, it's not even. We have a Kabbalah how much open there was, but the Beis HaMikdash in terms of length east to west took up 187 plus 135. The rest between east and west is open space. The width of the whole Beis HaMikdash is 135 consistently. Ezras Noshim is 135 east, north to south, and the Azorah is 135 north to south. So if we have 500 north to south, and the Beis HaMikdash only takes up 135, that means we have 365 amos north to south that are open space. How is that 365 split between the southern side and the northern side? We have a Kabbalah about that. And in fact, it's basically in this picture, it gives you the numbers. This is our Beis HaMikdash and our Har HaBayis. Wall of Har HaBayis, Ezras Noshim 135 by 135, Azorah 187 by 135, and this structure, Ulam, rectangle in the front, Heichal behind it, together 100 by 100 by 100, and this symbolized for us a lion, wide like a rectangle in the front, narrow in the back. Okay, B'nai will pick up tomorrow with Middos, Perek Hey, Mishnah Gimel.